weather?
I'll get there, Mr. Chairman.
That's what he asked, and yeah.
I'll get there, Mr. Chairman, but I did want to raise this issue of EUDR because it is part and parcel of this thing of climate change. And Mr. Chairman, technology is going to assist us. The biggest thing in terms of the Honorable Gikaria's question is technology. We all know that these days the meteorological department can actually predict very well. If you look at your mobile app and look at it, we can predict very well. There was a time when we talk about Russia, pale na pale, which was never going to happen. But I think that we are very confident. And as AI develops, the predictability and our ability to tell the weather is going to become more and more precise. And therefore, at that point, what then do we do? Because information is one thing, but what do you do when you do it? We need drought-resistant crops, drought-resistant animals that can withstand higher heat and longer and higher temperatures that currently exist. This is a scientific issue, and we are going to work with the research organizations to make sure that at least we mitigate part of what can be very severe natural disasters.
Thank you. Yes, Janet.
Chairman, I know the nominee was once a politician, but he has cleverly evaded the issue of the vaccine. And we know each other why he's doing that.
Mr. Chairman, it is indeed true that I was once a politician, but that is not, but I wasn't evading the question, because the matter is very simple to me. And in consultation with those in agriculture, we have also come to the same conclusion. I think the long and short of it is the following. Number one is that my understanding is that the whole vaccination process is to address two diseases. It is to address the PPR and foot and mouth disease. That's what the issue is about. Mr. Chairman, talked about earlier about social media and what can be propaganda and otherwise. And I think the most important thing is to involve those involved in the industry, including the members of this House, is to involve those involved with the information that we have. And say, this is a vaccine. It is being made by Kevavapi, who are our own people. It is for this and this purpose. We only vaccinate about 10% of our livestock. We want to vaccinate more than that. But the point of the matter is this. The cow, as I said earlier, belongs to an individual. It doesn't belong to the government. The goat belongs to an individual, not to the government. So the matter is simple. Here is a vaccine. It is for foot and mouth disease. You have a goat. Do you want the goat to be vaccinated? You say, yes, I want to be vaccinated. We vaccinate. You say, no, I don't want my goat to be vaccinated. Sawa. Do you have a cow? Do you want the cow to be vaccinated? This is the reason why it is to be vaccinated. You say, yes, we vaccinate. You say, no, we don't vaccinate. Allah?
Thank you.
Yes,
Robert.
Point of order, Honorable Chairman, point of order.
Yes, Mishi.
I think, Chairman, on the same breath, because there is a lot of misconception and a lot of negative narrative, so we wanted to hear from the nominee, how is he going to address to the public and put some trust to the public regarding the vaccination? We wanted to hear on that perspective.
Thank you, Honorable Mishi. The communication aspect of it is huge. The communication aspect of this is very big. And I'm going to use the experts. I'm going to use the experts in Kevavapi. I'm going to use the experts who understand this very well to be actually the lead communicators, just like we did with COVID, where we had the doctors themselves explain the issue. We also want to use the veterinary officers to themselves explain what we are trying to do. So you can be sure, Honorable Member, that I am going to put a very robust communication system on this matter.
Robert Mbui,
yeah, thank
Baya, Murugara.
Speaker, maybe before we leave that issue of vaccines,
yes,
Because I remember CS Mutahi telling us, if I can get it, you can get it on COVID. And largely, the issue of vaccines, the problem has been misinformation and the people communicating. Because the ministry has left it to the political class to communicate, and probably, should he be approved, is the area around that communication that he will need to look into, so that the right people, as you say, communicate, but also communicate the right information to the cow owners. Because again, if we leave it to the members of the public to decide, since the cow is mine, and I base my decision on misinformation, I could decide not to vaccinate my cow to my detriment and the detriment of the country's productivity. Probably, since he has already answered that, but just for information, Honorable Speaker, that should he be approved, that's some of the challenges you find.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Hold
As I
there,
said,
you'll come to
Sorry.
that. Robert?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The nominee says that he's very passionate to assist Kenyan farmers. Now, I have very quick concerns. One, there was this major scandal of fake fertilizer that made our Kenyan farmers lose very heavily. With your passion, will you consider initiating a process of compensating those farmers that lost, negatively, that were affected negatively by this scandal? There's also media reports, and this is what members here are talking about, indicating that despite there being no budgetary allocation, this issue of, livestock vaccination is actually being propagated by multinationals that want to test, vaccines on our animals. What is your comment on that? And finally, the government has been accused in the recent past of regulation of private business, especially agriculture. I mean, there's regulations on you have to get a license to grow, a license to harvest, a license to transport, a license to store, a license to sell. What is your comment on that? Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Nominee, I would like to ask you the following question. One, just on the oil crops and the cost of edible oils in Kenya, there has been a over-reliance on the importation of edible oils. And yet this country, especially at the coast, has huge potential to actually bring down the cost of edible oils and actually grow our GDP. Crops like coconut, cashew nuts, ground nuts, and many other nuts that grow at the coast. But there has been little investment in this sector, especially there, and farmers there feel that they have lost their land, and production, and there's nothing they get out of the land because government has not invested in these crops. What will you do if approved as Cabinet Secretary to ensure the people at the coast do not continue to suffer loss of productivity? Secondly, what is your position on GMO crops in Kenya? What is your position on the genetically modified organism crops in this country? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Murugara?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is on value addition to agricultural produce, and this involves crops and livestock production. The first one is that the reason why farmers are actually finding it difficult to get into agriculture is because they have to sell their crops raw without any value addition, as a result of which they are so cheap that it is expensive to grow them, it is cheap to sell those crops. Number two, also use of prohibited pesticides and chemicals to spray the crops. And when it comes to livestock, to actually vaccinate, as you have just explained, and to treat the diseases that affect our livestock. Some of the chemicals we use, pesticides, are banned in countries where we are supposed to be selling those crops. What are you likely to do so that you are able to cut the niche of the market out there as regards our agricultural crops and our livestock?
Ferdinand?
Nominee, I come from Trans Nzoia, and I want to be very, very specific. First and foremost, distribution of the fertilizer. you know, farmers must be attracted to do their job. But the distribution of fertilizers in the country is bad because it's put in one place and the farmers have to travel miles and miles to get whatever they want to go, so that the cost of actual production goes up. And so most of them are actually discouraged. Secondly, and I want to just correct you, you talked about the youths. I think you have to get the youth to get into extension services, because that is very, very important. And for you to get this youth, you must have a program to attract the youth, so that we have these extension services, so that the youth can be able to go there and do some work. And I think it's very important that we get that right. Lastly, if you don't mind, we had fake fertilizers, and the farmers, I don't know whether somebody asked that, but I don't think, yeah, somebody asked that. If we did, then of course, specifically, we have ADC land. And you rightly say the population of this country is going up. And yet ADC farms are lying idle. What are you going to do if you actually make you a minister for agriculture? Be specific on this one. Thank you.
Last on that round, Naisula.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the issue on livestock farm, I just want to put it to Honorable Mutahi Kagwe that it's one thing to speak very flowery words about leather, about livestock, but when you look even at the budgetary allocation that is given to the State Department on livestock, it is very minimal. And being honest as a country in ensuring that we take livestock matters seriously, because if you look at even the funding, most of the time it is donor funded. And donor funded, you know, it is for a specific period and for specific interventions, but not the whole aspect of it. But my question to you is that the whole issue on research as a country, in the past we have been a very, a country that is known for its research, and mostly on our foods, on even the livestock, on agriculture. I'd like to know what you think about us as a country on the measures that we are putting in place and what we need to do to ensure that research goes back to where it was and gets the necessary funding, because that is important.
Nominee, you can answer those 5.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me start with the issue of the fake fertilizers that was raised, because it has been raised by quite a number of members. And to answer as follows. Number one is that obviously that was an extremely unfortunate thing to do. Mr. Chairman, there are 2 areas that I find almost reasonable. One of them is the area of seeds, fake seeds, and the other one is fake fertilizers. Because that issue actually affects not only food security, but actually national security. Because if you grow for a whole year, you are growing something and it was fake from the beginning, or you give your cows fake feeds and they die, Mr. Chairman, this is a matter that I would like even to work with this House to create more civility in terms of the penalties that are involved when people sell fake fertilizers, when people sell fake seeds. This is an area where, if approved, Mr. Chairman, I would like to work with this House to create that civility. And to do so, I cannot, sitting here today, talk about what I can do in terms of the farmers who have lost. This is a matter that I would have to go into the ministry, look at it, discuss it with perhaps Treasury, and see what can be done. But I take your point that a loss was made, and somebody benefited from it, but nobody was compensated, for the loss. And it's a matter that I take and I'll take to heart. Mr. Chairman, on the issue of livestock vaccination, I spoke to it, and I spoke about what I believe. And obviously, sitting in the office, I will have the information at my fingertips. I will be clear. This is a vaccine that is being made locally by Kevavapi. One of the things that I would like to say as a highlight to all the things that I have been asked, including the pesticides that I think Mheshimiwa Ferdinand spoke about, is to say that there will be a rule of thumb that, in my opinion, the ministry, if approved, would adopt. Number one is this: whether GMO, whether pesticide, whether fertilizer, if that product is not being used in its country of origin, it will not be used in Kenya. If it is a fertilizer, if it is a GMO product, if it is a seed.
Do you know the case of Roundup?
Yes, I'm aware of the case of Roundup. I'm conversant with that debate, Mr. Chairman. In fact, there was a luring in Australia, I think it's this week or last week, that was made on the same, where in Australia they said that it is not carcinogenic, but this is something that I will sit with my scientists and my decide that the decisions will be made on the basis of science and data. Because it is not enough that I proclaim here, but I can tell you that there will be no product that is going to be sold in this country under my watch in the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock that is going to be a product being tested here. We are not guinea pigs. We will not be used by anybody as guinea pigs. I am aware, Mr. Chairman, for example, there are some organizations overseas that are rebranding their products so that instead of coming as the main product which has been banned overseas, they rebrand themselves as another product so that we can pass it here. And I can tell you that we will be as vigilant as we can be to ensure that we protect our farmers as well as our private sector players. In terms of the taxation regime, because I think, Honorable Member, that's what you are referring to. Yeah, the regulations and the many things that you have to pay. You have to pay for research, you have to pay for transport, you have to pay just to be able to export. You have to be able to, every single document has got a tax on it. You know, this is something that we need to look at, because by the end of the day, it would be better to create a bigger volume of business people and tax them a little than to have just a few business people, which you tax a lot. Because the bigger volume of business people create jobs, you know, the less ones don't. So I'll be fighting, you know, for that position to change. You know, I'll do whatever I can within the Ministry of Agriculture. But of course, this is something I have to work with my colleagues, you know, in other. On the issue of oil crops and farming of palm oil and other nuts, so on, particularly in the coast, yes, I completely agree that this is something that we have missed an opportunity here, because we are only producing about 10% of these oils. Yes, we use them every day. So we are using foreign exchange unnecessarily when we can actually grow palm oil. We have seen countries that have changed completely. Uganda, next door, is growing a lot of their oils now. So there is no reason why we can't do it. But I also know that we have got to work with the extension farmers that Mheshimiwa Wanyonyi also referred to. We have got to have educated extension farmers to change some of the cultural norms that our people have against or for farming certain goods. For example, I know for a fact that AFA has produced a huge quantity of coconut seedlings that they are trying to distribute. And therefore, there is an education and extension work that is required there to go and tell the people, we have got this, but it's not enough that you go to a farmer and tell them you have got coconut seedlings. How do you plant them? Where do you plant them? What sort of fertilizer do you use? Is it organic fertilizer? Is it mineral fertilizer? So there is quite a bit to be done so that we stop blaming the people and take responsibility ourselves to grow. On the issue of GMO, again, I repeat what I said, but we must also ask ourselves, what is GMO? You know, this genetic modified organism, what is the mischief that this organism, this genetic change is supposed to have done? And there are two sides to this. There is a positive side and there is a negative side. And one of the first things that we must do is ensure that the National Biosafety Authority is sufficiently funded, is sufficiently prepared to deal with GMOs. You cannot deal with GMOs in your country until you have got the institutional framework to make sure that the regulatory framework is there, to make sure that the rules and regulations to deal with those products and services are there, so that we are clear that if a GMO product comes, it will be to the benefit of our nation. And there are some benefits to some of the products. For example, if you look at the cotton growing areas, and you look at BT, and what has happened because of the absence of the worm, you can see that cotton is now increasing. We are now having more cotton. So they are, and let's also forget that genetic modification of plants happens naturally anyway. The maize that we are growing today is not the maize that we originally got from Mexico, centuries ago. It's a different one. Wheat is not the same. What is critical is for us to ensure that we are not used by people for testing their GMO products. If you have got a GMO product that you have designed yourself, use it in your own country. Let's get testimonials of what is happening with that GMO in that country. Then when you have failed or succeeded, let's talk about it then. Otherwise, it's GMOs that we have created for ourselves, using our own scientists, that we should be considering on a first line basis. Mr. Chairman, the National Biosafety Authority is currently very small, unstructured, and I would like to work with this House to ensure that we support it via budgetary allocations and so on, to make sure that that authority is sufficiently funded and properly run to help us with the GMO, because the GMO issue is going to become a big thing globally, and so we must be ready for it. I think I spoke about the fertilizers, but one of the things I didn't talk about is the process of getting it to the farmers. There has been, I know, just as a Kenyan, I know there is an outcry out there that whatever subsidy you give can very easily be offset by the transportation costs of where you are getting it from. And therefore, what I intend to do is working with the county governments, ensure that we use the processes in county governments, we use the processes in, with the cooperative movement, with the circles, to ensure that this can go as close to the people as possible. There would be no reason whatsoever why any farmer, for example, sitting in a county, should come to Nairobi to go and to come for fertilizer. That is something, is a cost that we should bear. Otherwise, we would be giving with one hand and taking the same with the other. And therefore, I'm not going to preside or supervise over an activity such as that one. The other aspect of fertilizer, I think, that has not been raised, and I also want to mention, is the question of accountability. Accountability of the subsidized fertilizers. And that is to say that if we must have proper data in terms of what is a farmer, how much has been allocated to a farmer, how much is going to them. Is it the same quantity or a different quantity? Do we have a situation where I've been allocated 5 bags and I get 3 bags, where another farmer has been allocated 10 bags and get 12 bags? And technology, again, here can help us with the traceability of the fertilizer. We need a platform that can say, as Mutahi Kagwe, I got a message that I can collect 5 bags, but I must also give feedback that I actually received 5 bags. That way, my allocation and what I actually received can be reconciled, and therefore that transparency can kill a lot of the suspicion that is currently within that accountability of the subsidized fertilizers. And yes, extension services, Mheshimiwa Wanyonyi, is the way to go. But I think what I want to clarify is that I do not see the youth as just people who are going to be employed in extension services. I see the youth as the major participants in the activities of farming. You and I and a lot of our age mates, are slowly disappearing. And we need to make sure that our food security is no longer with us. Our food security should be with the young people who are the ones who are getting children and so on. So yes, we are using them as extension people, but we want to mainstream agriculture also to the youth. On the issue of Mheshimiwa Naisula, spoke about the budgetary allocations and donor funding for the programs that are going on, particularly in the livestock keeping areas. And I want to say the two things. Number one is that we have got to be the ones driving the donors. We don't want donor-driven projects. Donor-driven projects have got a way of becoming expensive eventually. And you know, Mr. Chairman, this word donor is something that we need to clarify. You will remember, even in the 9th Parliament, we were talking about this definition, donor. Donor is not actually a real donor, as we understand it in the English language. It's a loan. It's actually a bank loan, which is disguised as a donor. So let's make sure that we are talking the right things. These people who come to do the projects in all the areas in agriculture, this is money that will eventually be paid by Kenyans. So we must not take donor-driven ideas. It is our ideas that we should be discussing with the donors. And in the course of that discussion, we must discuss the question of sustainability. What happens when this program is over? Part of the donor fund must be that sustainable aspect, the training of the farmers themselves, the training of the extension people themselves, so that when they are leaving a complete project that is ongoing. And to your question regarding research organizations such as CARO and the others, I think a lot of our research organizations have also been misused. Misused to the extent that we are working with international organizations. They are using our scientists to carry out this research. And what we find, and the discoveries that we make a patent out there by others who then bring the results of the research here for us to buy. I think that it is important for us to put a legal framework within our research organization. And I can tell you this is something I tried to introduce at KEMRI, because the same thing was happening with the researchers for health. I think it is also time for us to ensure that the researchers for vet medicines and vet services are also part of that understanding. Yes, we need to work with international organizations, because essentially research is international in its nature. But we must make sure that what we get here and our findings here remain ours. That data, when you see an organization coming to say they want to work with you in research, what they are looking for is data. We must make sure that that data belongs to us. And people can buy from us, not us use our nation, use our scientists to then buy from them.
Thank you. Yes, Ferdinand.